Hello everybody and welcome back to the second shelf and to another tops and flops video. Yes, I'm a little bit early. It's the 29th of October. So they're still included today and then 2 more days left. And I think I will finish 2 more books. And they're both really good. But next week is, a little after the fact. So I decided to film too much information, but I decided to film the tops and flops today. And if one of the 2 books that I'm most likely will finish, I feel the urge to include them in the tops and flops. They will just count for November. I mean, my videos, my channel, my rules, right? So anyway, tops and flops of the month of October. October was not that fantastic a reading month for me. I talked about that in one of last week's videos, especially for fiction. I don't know. I'm not getting the groove for fiction at the moment. So yeah, but there was still enough really excellent books. Thanks also to Buddyreads that I have enough to talk about. And as always, we start with the tops. And within the tops, as always, we start with the book that surprised me the most. And this time it's a short story collection, Catherine Ann Porter, Pale Horse, Pale Writer, selected short stories. This selection by Penguin Classics was published in 2011. And the stories are, of course, from the 30s, 40s, and 50s, because Catherine Ann Porter was an early 20th century writer. I talked about her extensively in my last Friday reads because I really admire her work. I came to her through her only novel, Ship of Fools, that she published in 1962, when she was already 72, and that was a bestseller and gave her finally financial independence. But she is most well known for her short stories. She was very much a perfectionist. That's at least what everybody, including herself, says. So her output was not huge. That was not what surprised me the most. I buddy-read this collection with Adam from Momentum Mori. As always, I will leave his Instagram handle down below, a link to his Instagram handle down below. And we talked about the fact that, these stories were she wrote these stories over quite, I don't know, 2 or 3 decades. And it includes her most famous long short stories, Noon Wine, Old Mortality, and the title story, Pale Horse, Pale Rider, which is about the 1918 influenza epidemic. But still, I think what surprised me, why I wanted to include this collection in the tops, and why it surprised me so much, is the incredible range of story and storytelling that you find in Catherine Ann Porter's short stories. If you had, I at one point said to Adam, if you had given me 3 of her short stories, one that she wrote when she was in Mexico, living in Mexico, and one about Texas, and then maybe the title story, I would not have guessed that this is the same author. She, if you read, especially, I think maybe with novels, I don't know whether you can say that, but I think with short stories, you often have the feeling that the author, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but that the author has a sort of shtick. Alice Munro always writes about women, relationships, that kind of thing. I read a short story collection recently where the stories were all from the young, sassy black girl perspective, or almost all. If you read even Ursula Le Guin, whom I admire greatly, as you know, she has this a topic of identity and various cultures clashing and not understanding each other. Catherine M. Porter doesn't have that, in my opinion. And Adam said maybe that is the reason that she is not read as widely as she might deserve, because people don't really know how to, deal with her or how to get a grip. But I think she's brilliant. She's absolutely brilliant. Not every story resonated with me or worked with me in the same way, no, but even the ones that I felt did not speak to me that deeply were just absolutely brilliant. So if you have never read Catherine M. Porter, try out her short story collection, and because it's definitely absolutely worth it. Next up in the tops is, as always, the book that I thought about the most. And actually, I could have switched the first and the second one, surprised, and thought about the most, because it sort of applies both aspects or criteria apply to both of them, but I had to choose, and as always, too much information, so let's just stop the babbling and get on to the book. And it's Octavia Butler, Wild Seed, a Patternist novel. It's in the series, the Patternist series, book number 1, published in 1980. Octavia Butler, I don't think, needs much of an introduction. She was a Black American science fiction writer, and I struggle with her a bit in the sense that I absolutely loved her Xenogenesis series, especially the first book. I thought that was brilliant, brilliant sci-fi, political. And then I read a couple of her other books. The Parable series didn't work for me. And Kindred, didn't like it much. I have to admit, I didn't think the plot was that well done. So I wanted to give another book or series a try and see, whether I can find anything written by her that I love as much as the Xenogenesis series. So I started this one, Wild Seed, and it is it was a wild ride. It's a weird book in a way. You have two immortals, two spirits, Doro, the male spirit, and a female spirit, Aniyanvu, and they meet way back centuries ago in Africa. And then the story develops because they are immortals, until almost the present day. So they go to America during the slavery and then abolition, and so the story is not what I want to talk about, and I don't want to spoil you. But I thought the themes that Octavia Butler discussed and the way she discussed it, that really had me think. She talks about, breeding a certain race, so eugenics. But there is also a lot of people, brothers and sisters, mating, quote unquote, father and mother, father and daughters, or mothers and sons. So you have this whole topic of incest, what we would call incest, but it's not really addressed at all as a topic or an issue, and that kind of threw me. So I don't know. I really kept thinking about this. Why would she being Octavia Butler, why would she not talk about these things in this way? So if you have read Wild Seed, let me know how you felt about these, especially not the plot or anything, but these two topics. The breeding of a special race, so eugenics, and the whole thing of family members mating with each other. I mean, I enjoyed the story. It was not for me as brilliant as the Xenogenesis series. Not sure whether I will continue. I'm not good with series, as you know, but I definitely liked this one, just to make that clear. And as always, the third and last pick in the tops is the nonfiction book, the best nonfiction book. And that was more difficult because like I said in last week in my video, I read a lot of nonfiction at the moment because I don't gel that well, don't gel that well. I'm rhyming with fiction. So I had a really wide range of choices, but in the end, it wasn't that difficult. I had fabulous reads, but I thought the best one, the one that also impacted me the most, was a short little book that was published this year, Anthea Butler, White Evangelical Racism. I think it was published in the spring. It's only about 180, so it's under 200 pages, and I read it as an ebook. That's why picture. Butler is a professor in Pennsylvania. She studied theology, and she's a professor of religion, comparative religion or something, at the University of Pennsylvania, and she talks about religion mostly. I didn't know her. I'm now following her on Twitter, of course, but before I came across this book, I didn't know her work. And the book is just what it says on the tin. She explores the history of the evangelicals, white evangelicals in the US, from the beginning of the United States as we know it, until the present, and how racism was always tied into this specific religious belief, and how it developed politically, and the influence that evangelicals, white evangelicals, have in politics, and always had in politics, but certainly have today, and how this group, this religious group, is also responsible is not the right word, because there are other factors play, but partly responsible also for the division, the huge cultural division within the United States. And for me as a foreigner, with limited knowledge of the US and the history of the US, this was really a brilliant book, because it's concise, it gives information without info dump, and it talks about an important topic. So I can highly recommend this one. That made it into the tops for the month of October. So these were the 3 tops for the month of October. On to the flops. And like I say in the show notes, I did not really have a horrible, bad book, or a book that angered me. I also realized that I hadn't DNF'd a book this year, so I'm obviously better in choosing books, or I don't count DNF if I download a sample, a Kindle sample, the first 20 pages, and I read that and think, nah, that's not counting as a DNF, because I don't count that as really having started the book. Anyway, we have a t-shirt situation here, so I have to sort of, yes. Okay, anyway, so the 2 books, it's more that I read them and I was like, yeah, but they were not really for me. And the first one was a buddy read for Victober, and that is Lady Audley's Secret by Mary Elizabeth Braddon in this beautiful Penguin classic edition, first published in 1857. I read this, obviously, like I said, for Victober, and there is one prompt. If you followed Victober by the ladies who organize it, read a Victorian sensational novel. And I think everybody and their mother read this one, because it popped up somewhere and it sounded okay or interesting. So a lot of people are reading this one, and I'm interested especially to hear from people who really liked it. This was a buddy read, like I said, for me, with Kim from middle of the book March. And I think she sort of, I don't know whether she would put it in the flops. She liked it okay, maybe a little better than I did, because let me tell you the story first. So it's about a young woman, Lucy, who marries a much older man, Sir Audley, becoming Lady Audley, but she has a dark secret now, hasn't she? And then the story takes off from there, and there's a younger relative of Sir Audley, Sir Michael and Robert, and he starts to investigate her. And of course, everything, we will learn what happens. And there's also a bit of a romance involved. The main thing for me with this book is I was bored. You could figure out the secret, like after 20 or 30 pages, it comes this huge hint in another a friend of Robert's comes into the story, and he tells Robert something that you immediately know. Oh, okay, that's the secret, and it is. But that's still 250 pages away from the end, so it just didn't resonate in suspense terms with me at all. And I didn't find the villain scary at all, a female villain. So it was nice to have read it, but my conclusion was, well, I often don't really get along with commercial fiction that well. Not even with Victorian commercial fiction, because this was commercial fiction back then. It was a huge bestseller, and it spoke to the anxiety of the time. So yeah, but for me, it was just I think I probably would have put it aside if it hadn't been for a buddy read. And I didn't hate read it because it's a fast-paced read, but it just didn't really, it bored me. And the second book in the flops is I find it even more difficult to put it in the flops because it's a memoir, and a memoir about a medical condition. And I always find it actually not done, to speak badly about a book where a person really bears their soul, and especially not if it's about medical issues. That having said, the book is also a new release, just a couple of weeks ago, I think. Sarah Rule, Smile, the story of a face. And it is about Sarah Rule's experience with Bell's palsy. I will leave a link to a medical website down below. You can check out more detail of Bell's palsy if you're interested. But in short, it means that a specific nerve in your face, it's inflamed or compressed or not working properly anymore, and that makes your muscle stiff, and that means is either your one side of your face is drooping, you can't smile, you can't close your eyes, things like that. In most cases, Bell's palsy goes away within weeks, sometimes months, but for Sarah Rule, it didn't. Sarah Rule is a playwright, by the way, an American playwright, a successful playwright, Broadway and off-Broadway. I didn't know her, I admit immediately. And she got Bell's palsy after quite a difficult delivery of twins. And the book is about, her developing Bell's palsy and how that went, and that it didn't go away. And it's almost 10 years or something it covers, or maybe even more. And I thought the first part was really engaging, and I learned a lot. She has a beautiful writing. She really, playwright, she can write. But why the book just didn't work for me, was the religious stuff. I am not a religious person, and the whole thing with prayers and grace and stuff, it just doesn't work for me. So I think, therefore, I felt allowed to put it in the flops. But again, if you're interested in the topic and you don't mind or even enjoy religious talk, by all means, then Smile might be something for you. Anyway, those were the tops and flops of the month of October. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it. As always, I'm looking forward to your comments. And yes, I'm behind again. But only a week, so I will try to catch up this weekend, and I'll talk to you soon in the next one.